Hey everybody, welcome to The Whole Elephant. My name is Eric McClanahan, and the podcast is called The Whole Elephant, but I'm thinking about changing the title to Eric Meets and Interviews the Loveliest Humans. I am just on a roll of being blown away by the kindness and generosity of the guests that come on this show, and today is no different. My guest today is Elise McCann, actress on the stage, screen, film, all those things. Credits are super long. Google it, look it all up. She's been in Matilda, Mamma Mia. She co-wrote and starred in Everybody Loves Lucy, a one-woman show about the life of Lucille Ball. And is just incredibly kind and generous and smart and funny. And I met her and immediately loved her at a party that I was at, where we'll talk about this in the episode, but she completely saved me from an awkward night where I knew nobody at this party. And I have been a fan of Elise since that night. And hopefully after listening to this, you will be a fan if you are not already. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the chat. Elise, good morning. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm very well. I'm very well. It's
In
a
New York
beautiful
City.
day.
Look at
Yeah,
you.
coming to you from Upper West Side, New York City. The sun is just shining. It's that weird mix of like moving into fall, and so it's kind of starting to
Yeah.
rain a little bit, starting to cool down a bit, but you could still wear short sleeves. It's kind of like perfect time.
Yeah, you're describing my life in Los Angeles all year round. That's pretty much.
Amazing. You've nailed it.
Upper West Side, that's nice. I feel like anytime I've been to New York, I've always landed on, this is where I would live. I think Upper West Side is by the park enough and
Yes.
just seems
I
like a
think
nice area to live.
Yeah, it is. I think I have lived all over over the time that I've lived in New York. I've lived up in Harlem, I've been down in Chelsea, I've been on the East, I've been in Brooklyn, and I ended up getting into the Upper West because a family friend of mine had an apartment on like 96th and Broadway, and she mostly lives in Connecticut, but they had this apartment that was kind of there, and so she had said one time, just stay, you can come and stay. And she gave me keys. And so for like a period of like a year, anytime I was there, I could just like a year or 2 years, I could just let myself in and stay in this apartment. It was amazing. Um,
Yeah.
but it was kind of, it meant that I got this introduction to the Upper West where the subways are so easy because there's like,
Yeah.
you've got your expresses and your locals, but it's exactly what you said. It's close to the park. There's lots of trees around, but there's still a lot of stuff going on. So there's like great restaurants, great bars. So it's a nice compilation. There's just feels like a little bit more space, a little bit more nature, but it's still a cool kind of area.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm from Sydney, and so for me, I love that little bit more of nature. And
This is
yeah,
not your first like long time stint in New York City though. You've
no,
lived here before?
yeah. Yeah, I got my green card. So my dad's American, and my family, like my dad's family through my grandmother, are from Louisville, Kentucky.
Heyo.
Yeah, hey, and so yeah, so my dad lived here for a big part of my life. My mum's English, so she's from Bath in the UK, but my parents had myself and my sister in Australia, and they raised us there for a while. My dad moved back here, and so I came to visit a lot. And then when I was old enough, I kind of got my green card, my kind of ability to live here, and would come back and forth a bit. And then in 2018, I kind of properly came over for a period of time between 2018 and then COVID, really. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So that's when I was mostly living here. And I was, doing the grind, auditioning, got some work, was doing some producing, was kind of, working in a whole bunch of different fields, but loving it. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, kind of went back to Australia with COVID.
Yeah. New York City might be one of the worst cities during COVID to live in. Just
I think it could have
humans
been,
stacked
yeah.
on humans stacked on humans. That's a rough place to be during
Uh,
COVID.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, I had this really weird exit because I actually think I got back to Australia on March 13th, which probably doesn't mean very much to most people, but in Australia they brought in these kind of lockout laws where essentially like if you entered after a certain date, you had to go into quarantine
Yeah.
and or you kind of couldn't re-enter. And I got in 2 days before those laws kind of came into place. And so I
Yeah.
kind of very luckily kind of got in. But my mum had been sick. My mum had got diagnosed with cancer back in 2019 at the
Oh,
end.
wow.
And so I'd been coming back and forth every 6 weeks or so anyway. It's
Mhm.
costing a fortune in flights, but I had great frequent flyer points and meant I could see my mum. So I'd been going back and forth. So it was kind of a no-brainer when kind of COVID came about. It was like, oh, I don't want to be anywhere that I can't be closer to my mum if I need to.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
yeah, so it was kind of a really easy decision.
Well, I need to start this podcast by thanking you
Yeah.
immensely.
Oh,
So the night that we met, we were both at a after party for Tim Minchin concert,
we were.
and I had gone to New York by myself, without my wife, without anyone I knew. And this after the there was two nights, and the first night of Tim's show, the after party was like 7 people. So I walked in, and Tim's like, "Meet all 7 people. Great, hang out." But the second this second night was in a typical like really dark New York bar, and we
Yes.
were in like this tight corner, and I felt like clearly like I was the only one who didn't know anybody. And it was like I don't even know. I'm not a person that's like afraid to like walk up and say hello to people and introduce myself and start conversations, and networking and meeting people is why I was there, right? I was
Yeah.
on a mission. But it was the most awkward, uncomfortable I have ever felt in my whole life. Like literally for like 40
Oh,
minutes. And I'm like texting my wife, like, this is so brutal. Because it was such a tight area that everyone who knew each other were so closed off in groups
I
that I couldn't
agree.
like,
You couldn't
and
just general enter something, yeah, because everyone was
yeah,
so crammed in. Everyone had backs to each other. It was weird.
exactly. And the only person I know is Tim, who is the one person everyone wants to talk to. And the only other 2 people I'd recognize are you and Andy, who everyone wants to talk to. And so after like 40 minutes, I think Tim noticed that I was struggling big time and brought me over to your group. And you were the kindest, sweetest
Oh,
person and embraced it, brought me over to meet Andy. And from that point on, I had a lovely night. So I just have to
oh,
say thank you. Is this you feel like a person that is a connecting person? You mentioned doing a lot of producing and stuff like that. Is
yeah.
this your personality? Are you the connector of the group?
I am a bit of a connector of a group. I think yeah, wow. Well, firstly, thank you. That's a very nice thing to say. It was lovely to meet you, and you had such an interesting story and such an interesting way that you'd met Tim. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And we obviously had some mutual things in common. You knew Eddie, and Eddie,
Yeah.
Eddie Perfect, obviously, and he's a good friend. And so it was just so easy. It was so easy to have a conversation. Um, but no, I guess I am a bit of a connector. I think I I like to know people's names. I like to remember people's names and be able to reuse someone's name. So when I was younger, I kind of started this thing where I consciously would try and say someone's name like a couple of times when I was talking to them. So
Oh,
it would stay in
yeah.
my brain. And then it became this thing where then if I was ever introducing anyone, I was like, oh, I want people to be able to I didn't even know if it was conscious, but I would start to introduce people as like, oh, this is Eric. He has this amazing podcast. He's really great friends with Tim. Actually, we met at this thing here, but we weirdly had this interaction with Eddie Perfect. Like, I'll just like give a bit of like a bio or something. And it's not even, it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
intentional originally, but like now I'm like, I really embrace it. And I try to
Yeah,
introduce everyone with something about their life that I think then means other people can have conversation because it gives you context and commonalities.
totally.
And and I like that because then it means I feel like I can actually have a conversation with someone that's different to the surface exterior of just like, what are you working on? Oh, blah, 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 blah. What are you doing next? Which is all, great conversation. And I love our industry and you want to have those conversations.
Yeah.
But I just want to be able to have something else that I can connect to someone with. And I think that helps everyone.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, I guess I've become a bit of a connector. I tend to, yeah, I like to, I guess, bring people together. The more the merrier, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, I literally was like 5 minutes from bolting. I was like, I can't stand this
No.
anymore. Like
Imagine
literally,
we would never have like had this interaction.
I know. And literally the waiters were coming over and be like, "Are you okay? You need something?" I think they thought like I wasn't actually part of the party.
Oh no.
No, but I think I admire it because it's not my personality to do
Yeah.
that. I need to do the remembering the name game. I've been working at the same church for 18 years, and every Sunday I'm so grateful that like as people walk in, they just like scribble their name on a name tag and put it on.
Yeah.
And it's for people who
Uh,
are like new to meet new people, but me being there 18 years, I still don't remember a lot of people's names. I'm grateful for the name tag every time. So
but
I
what's your
admire
super
people that can do that and connect people. I appreciated it so much that night.
do,
Goodness.
do you have a superpower in another way? Like I, for some reason, have just been lucky to have, I have a great short-term memory. Like I can remember names or information, or I can remember choreography really quickly. I can pick up a script and learn it and pretty much know it straight, within like an hour. But
Yeah.
if I don't use something, it's gone. Like I can't tell you the lyrics to the songs from Mamma Mia anymore. I can tell you, like I can, yeah. So I have a great short-term memory, but not so much long-term, which helps really a lot when you're doing things like meeting people. What's your
Yeah.
superpower then? If you're not a name person, like what do you like, or what do you go, oh, actually, I'm good at that.
Yeah, lyrics.
Lyrics.
I remember every lyric I've ever sung my entire life. Lyrics just stick. I don't know. Something
That's
about the
impressive.
melody and the word just fitting in the melody just makes me
Yeah.
remember it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're a music man. Like it
Yeah,
hits you.
sure.
Yeah.
Take me to the beginning of Elise falling in love with art and theater and acting, producing, all
Oh,
this stuff. You can go any direction you want with it, but like
yeah.
where does it start?
You know what? I mean, I feel like over the course of my career, you get asked a lot about how you became an actor, or, you know, how you began producing or writing. And I almost every time I answer it, I feel like different things have happened in my life which remind me of something else that might have actually been the start. And so I feel
Yeah.
like if you were to listen to or read any interview that I've done, you'd hear a different answer. And I think that's not because, I'm trying to change it up. It's just that how you as you get older in life, someone reminds you of something else, or someone, you have an
Yeah.
interaction with your mom or whatever. And for me, like I had used to think that I just had always been someone that just loved telling stories, which I think I was. Like I used to make my sister like act out scenes with me, like play shop. And I'd watch a lot of old movies with like, back in the day in Australia, there used to be a lot of movie musicals. I think it was called TMT or I can't remember. There was like a channel, TMC or something, which had like movie musicals.
Yeah.
So, and I used to watch all of those. And so I just loved, I don't know, I just used to always do it. I think that my parents put me into like drama class and dance class when I was really little. I did ballet when I was like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And I hated it. After like a year or two, I stopped. And I think it was because I didn't like being told what to do or something. I don't know, but I stopped ballet and I picked up like jazz and tap and gymnastics, and I did other things. But but yeah, I just kind of I just, as far back as my memories go, I did it. But I used to, yeah, write my own songs, and I used to make my parents listen to me perform them. And I used to sing out of tune. Like I was not good. It was just that I loved it, And I'm kind of
Yeah.
glad now that I wasn't amazing. I'm sure I was, good enough and probably good for like, my age or something. But I
Yeah.
definitely wasn't, one of those people that just naturally had awesome pitch and naturally was
Sure,
brilliant.
sure.
But I'm glad for it now, because I think that then it really made me work hard, and had to like help me learn technique and learn how to yeah, sing different styles and be a better actor, not just like an over actor or just like a
Yeah.
bold character. um and also like I wasn't ever like I never felt like I was like the pretty girl, so I never felt like I was always cast in like the character roles at school.
Mm.
And maybe that's because um I was a bit freer to be a character, or maybe that's just because I was a bit awkward and I had glasses and frizzy hair and all these things. But it meant that then you know, I tried to. I don't know, I think I learned to be funny and I learned other
Yeah.
things. And I'm really glad for now because as I got older, I was able to play some of the things that typically maybe would be like the ingenue role. But
Right.
I'd always had this like, funny girl behind me.
Do you
So
do you look at it now and go, look who's the lead now? Ha ha.
sometimes I'm not joking. Sometimes I've been like, oh my God, who am I? What? Uh, but no, I'm glad for it. Like I'm really glad for it. But I think that I wonder also, like I'm getting deep. I don't know why I'm getting deep, but we're going there. I wonder
Yeah.
also, like my I have wonderful parents and I have a wonderful sister. But my parents fought when I was young. Like I remember them,
Mm.
they had their challenges and they ended up
Yeah.
separating when I was younger. And I remember, and this is something I've only really remembered like more recently in talking to my
Mhm.
mom or my dad or my sister or whatever. But I my memories were always just of being the one that would like be the entertainer in the
Yeah.
family, like, and I think that, and I used to always attribute that to being like, oh, I just loved it, that's just who I was, and I'm sure that's a
Yeah.
part of it. But I have in more recent years started to think about whether or not that was innately who I was, or whether that was a role that I started to play or took on to try and like keep the peace
To
or
make
to
everything
distract
okay. Yeah.
things, make everything okay. And so
Yeah.
I kind of like when I think more these days about why I went into this job, I do know, and I can honestly say that a big part of it is I fucking love it. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, but sorry, I'm a bit
Go
of a
for it.
swearer.
Let it fly,
But
baby. Let it fly.
I do, like, I fucking love it. Like, it makes me joyous. And I'm a
Yeah.
better person when I get to perform because my cup feels full. And so therefore I think I'm kinder, I'm more generous, I'm more willing to like be nice to others. I don't know. Not that I ever not don't want to be that way, but it's so, I don't know, I feel so grateful when I get to perform. So I do know it's intrinsically something I love.
Yeah.
But I do think that there was a part of maybe me doing this career that was about trying to make things okay and trying to
Yeah.
like be yeah, make other people feel comfortable or yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Isn't it
yeah.
wild when we discover that stuff later in life? But like as an
Mm-hmm.
elementary school kid, it was just like a survival instinct.
That's it. It's like
You know
what
what I
you did
mean?
to fit in. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. Totally.
You're probably a little kid going, well, they're not fighting while I'm performing, so I'll
That
perform so they don't fight.
and this is the thing. I don't want to misrepresent. Like my parents weren't fighting all the time, but I just mean I could tell, my sister was quite anxious. And so she
Mm.
would I remember my sister like we'd have to go and get a hat because at school in Australia you have to wear a hat in the playground. It's like this thing called no hat, no play. And so because of the
Wow.
sun is so strong, yeah, you have to wear a hat. And so we'd have to get a hat. And I remember my sister crying because she couldn't find something that felt comfortable for her. And at that time, she was dealing with a lot of anxiety. And I didn't understand it. I just knew that it was uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And I remember that, like, my mom was always trying to be something for everyone. Like, she was catering and she was doing her master's and she was working as a nurse and trying to like run this household. And
Hey, Andy.
and she was like, she was, you can't hear, I've got earpods in.
Oh, yeah.
But she was trying to do all these things and service everyone else, but that would then sometimes create tension because the house was always a mess. And my dad, I think, was working really hard and trying to run his own business, and then felt like the house was the last thing that was important, or the family was the last thing that was important, and just no one was
Yeah,
communicating properly. And
for
so it
sure.
wasn't that anyone was bad. I had an amazing childhood, and I'm really grateful for my parents.
Sure.
But you could just tell there was tension at different times,
Sure,
and
yeah.
I think
I
that was
think
also
it
probably how I dealt with my anxiety.
yeah, no, I think it's funny first of all that in America we're worried about like school shooters and in Australia they're like no hat, no
Yeah.
play. You
It's not even
gotta
a joke, my
gotta
friend.
put a hat on.
Yes,
Like, oh,
yes.
simpler,
Oh
a
my God,
little simpler.
totally. I think about that. I have some really good girlfriends that live over here and that have had like little kids or
Yeah.
and it becomes into conversation like going to school as their kids get closer to school age because
Yeah.
it is just not a thing in Australia. That's not to suggest that there's not violence or there's not guns or
Yeah.
anything like that, but we just don't have school shootings. I'm going to knock on wood, but we don't have things like that. We don't have mass
I know.
shootings. And it's just so it is such a bizarre thing to comprehend when you're not part of that world,
Yeah.
that like kids have to learn how to protect themselves at school or what to do if there is a shooting. Like I just can't even comprehend it.
Yeah.
But yes, but skin cancer is a big deal. So yeah, slip, slap, slap, guys, slip, slap, slap. Slip on a shirt, slap on some sunscreen, slap on a hat.
That's the slips. That's so
Yeah.
great. That's so great. When did you notice like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. This is what I want to do for a
I
career?
think, yeah, I mean, look, I thought I was kind of, I knew I was kind of good at it in the sense that I would get cast in some roles at school. Like I do
Mhm.
like the school musical. And I did like one or two amateur musicals, mostly for like the community. Like my sister was doing it. I thought she was really cool. And so I just wanted to do what she was doing. And then I kind of went like 10 times harder. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, then maybe I should try and get a role rather than just be on the ensemble or something.
Yeah.
So I knew that I liked it and I knew that I was probably good in some capacity because I would get cast as a role. But I honestly didn't think it was going to be my career. I thought I went to a regular high school. I'd never tried to get an agent. I never tried to do anything professional.
Hmm.
I went to quite an academic high school. It was an all girls private school. But it was a really cool school. My parents, worked really hard to be able to send us there. And private school fees at that time were very different to what they are now.
Mm.
But I think that it was one of those schools where you could do anything. So like I did music, I did choir, I did
Yeah.
drama, I did future problem solving, I did debating, I did cricket, swimming, rowing, gymnastics, netball. Like I did everything.
Did it have
And
a religious affiliation or was it just a
it
private
did.
school?
It was a Catholic girls' school, but
I went to
what
Catholic
I
boys school for high school.
there you go.
Yeah.
And what I loved about it though was that like even though it was a Catholic girls' school, we learned Judaism, Taoism,
Mm.
Buddhism, like
Yeah.
Hinduism, a whole range of other denominations. I learned about them. And I'm so glad for it because it kind
And
of
how
really
evil
opened
they
up.
were.
Amazingly, that wasn't the message,
Yeah.
thankfully.
Actually, me
But
neither. Yeah.
yeah, it was really cool. Like it was good. And look, I think the thing about Catholicism, and I don't, everyone is entitled to their own faith. And I think that faith has its own place for everyone. I would never want to preach to someone about what is or isn't allowed or right. Um, what I'm grateful for is the way that it focused on service and on
Mm.
community and on doing for others because it is a good thing to do and trying to treat people well and taking responsibility for our part in things. Like that's the part that I also am really grateful for. Like it taught you to take responsibility. Like if I do something wrong, that doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. Take responsibility for it, own it, apologize, like make
Mm.
amends,
Yeah.
try and be a better person. No one is perfect. We all have faults. We all fail. We all do things wrong at times. And that means that not only, you know, treat yourself with kindness, but own your own shit, but then look at other people with best intentions, with the
Yeah.
assumption that they are also trying to do their best. And at any given day, at any given time, someone's best changes. And there are things that I've done in my past that I'm like, oh, I really wish that I had managed that situation better.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, cool. Well, then I'm going to do better in the future, like,
Yeah.
and so anyway,
Yeah.
I'm glad for those parts that
Yeah.
taught me to try
Sure.
and be, yeah, good with community. But essentially to go back to it, at school, I did all these different things and the school encouraged that. So it kind of fostered this sense in my brain that I had plenty of opportunities. I could do whatever I wanted. And so I thought maybe I'll be a journalist. Maybe I'll be a lawyer. I applied for law school. I got into law school when I finished high school. And so I didn't think I was necessarily going to be an actor. I think I loved the idea of it. And I did audition for
Yeah.
drama school. And I also got into NIDA, which is a drama school in Australia.
Mm.
And so I'd gotten into NIDA and gotten into law and was like, oh shit, what do I do? And my mum was like, go to NIDA, you can go back to law school whenever. And so I did.
Mm.
So it kind of happened that way. But it wasn't necessarily.
Was that an in character thing for your mom?
You know what? It really kind of was like
Yeah.
both my parents, none of them are like creative. Like I shouldn't say creative. My mum paints, but
Mm.
none of them are like musical or theater or acting or anything like that. And my mum's really only found painting in the last 5 to 10 years. So,
Mm.
growing up, that wasn't the go. But but again, they've just always really, I don't know, they've just been really encouraging of my sister and I, and really treated us and taught us that we were capable, and taught us that we are allowed to dream big,
Mm.
and if you work hard and try, that's all that matters. Like, don't, if it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you don't, like, what is, there is no like making it. Like, they just always
Yeah.
encouraged us and made us feel loved. And
Right.
so I think that that meant that we were really lucky to have this safety net, that like we didn't have a lot of money. Like, we weren't like a wealthy family. We weren't like, social status kind of family, but they were really loving parents. And even though my dad lived, on the other side of the world for a lot of my upbringing, I knew I was loved by my parents, and
Yeah.
that really, I think, meant that we felt safe to just try things.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have a 10-year-old daughter and I try to take on that disposition so much,
Yes.
And I think one of the biggest things that I've taken away in parenting was I heard somebody say like if your daughter sucks at math and is great in tennis, hire a tennis coach, not a math tutor. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
just excel at what you want to excel at and love, and the rest we'll manage it. We'll get through
Totally.
math, which we are
Yes.
kind of,
Yeah.
but
That's so true. I love that idea. I think as well, like, I think you're so right. It's like, um, I think that the more we kind of remind people that there is no one right way, like
yeah,
your special spice, your kind of secret superpower will reveal itself. And
yeah,
yeah, and I think, like, I always say that to people when I get asked to go and speak to young people, whether they're teenagers or, early grads. I always try and say, like, don't worry about, particularly if people are doing like I don't know what you call it here in Australia, we call it your HSC or your VCE. It's like your graduating exams in high school that kind of give
mm,
you your marks to kind of get into universities. What do you call that here? Like
SATs,
your SATs. Thank you, thank you,
yeah,
thank you. So I used to always say to people when they were, picking subjects for their SATs or studying for it, I was like, do subjects that you like. Even you don't have to, it doesn't have to be like the favorite subject, but do things that you actually have an interest in. Don't just do the ones that scale well, because if you don't have
right,
any interest in it, you're doing something for the sake of it. You're not going to be passionate about it, and you're probably not going to go into a career of that. So
yeah,
just because they scale well, you're not going to do well if you don't like it. If you actually like and are engaged in a subject, you will do so much better. Like, I came fifth in the state in music, and I ended up and I did really well in drama, and they are subjects that don't naturally scale high. But I also did 3 in at maths because I loved maths because I was a nerd, and I just liked that there was a right and a wrong. Like, I loved the
yeah,
specificity of, you got this right. And I also did like modern history, and I'd done economics, and I did a whole weird range of subjects. And I ended up getting like 99.45 out of 100 for my marks or something. So, like, a crazy
yeah,
mark, which is because I did subjects that I liked, not because they were, and I worked hard at them, not because they
right,
necessarily were the ones that would scale well. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm like, do what you love. You'll go so much better at it.
Do you have a like a big break moment? Do you have like one role where you were like, "Oh, this is it. I've made it."
Look, honestly, getting cast as Miss Honey in Matilda was a big break for me.
Yeah.
Partially because it was the big show. Like, it was the show that everyone wanted to do. It had done so well around the world,
Yeah,
and it
was there
was,
just like mad energy going into that because it
oh
had
yeah.
been in London and had been on Broadway
And
and it
was
was
still in
finally
mode, was
coming
still
back to
running.
Tim's home type of thing? Like,
Yeah,
hey, here we go. It's coming back to where it kind of originated from, I guess, the hometown hero sort of vibe. It had to have had
very much.
crazy energy.
Oh my God, it was insane. Like, there was crazy energy because of Tim, but also it was still running on Broadway. It was still running on the West End. Like, it was like a hit.
Yeah.
And it just, you just knew that there was something magic about it. How every now and then there's like the big show. It's like when Hamilton comes to town, for the
Yeah.
first time to a country or something. There's some
Yeah.
shows like Groundhog Day had a bit of that energy, even though it hadn't run as long, or, as say Matilda had, or Hamilton had. There was a sense of, like, people knew that there was something. It was a great piece of theatre. Like, there are
Yeah.
certain shows, Beetlejuice has that. Like, there are certain shows that yeah, have like a really exciting energy. Moulin Rouge had that because it feels like the next big show.
Yeah.
Um And so it felt like that, but also because it was international, so like all the Brits, like Matthew Warchus was directing it, and they brought out Laurie Perkins, who and Nick Ashton. Nick was the associate, and Laurie and Matthew was on Zoom, and Laurie Perkins was the musical supervisor. And they brought all of them out, and they were doing the auditions, and so it was kind of cool because they didn't have any preconceived ideas about the actors in Australia. So, like the
Mm.
casting teams and the Australians that were working on it could say, "Oh, we think we should bring in these people because we think they'd be really great for it," and they obviously are because they were
Yeah.
amazing actors. But they were also, if they happened to see someone in the course of the process that they thought was really good, and they responded to, that person kept going in the process. Like that person got in the door
Mm.
because there was no preconceived ideas about what you could or couldn't do. It was like whoever
Right.
did the work on the day. And for me, it felt like such a big break because I really started, I started in the ensemble. I was like third girl from the left in Fiddler on the Roof. That was my first show. And it was with Topol. So it was like a big production. But
Yeah.
but I was like, yeah, I was like no one. And I got given a solo. And then I got to like cover a role. And then I got to play a role. And then I got another minor role. And then I swung for a while. I swung a couple of shows. So I was
Yeah.
really working my way up. And I'd I'd ended up writing a show because I'd been offered Les Mis actually, and I'd been asked to swing on Les Mis, a whole bunch of roles. And I, for whatever, had gone through a big heartbreak, and I remembered feeling I only want to do things that really, really, really excite me.
Mm.
And when you're kind of a bit heartbroken or something else has happened in your life, and you have the compass sits differently, like the sense of
Mm.
like career trajectory has a different. Like it sits differently in terms of the spectrum of how you make decisions. Like you
Oh,
really have
interesting.
to, when you're, for me, when my heart was a bit broken and a bit vulnerable, very much the focus was feeling joy, feeling excited, feeling full again.
Yeah.
And so I said no to Les Mis, which at the time felt crazy because that was like, oh, the big show that had come back to Australia.
Yeah.
Um, and I wrote this two-hander about Lucille Ball because had thought that she was amazing, this trailblazer, and she was a clown and all these things. So I wrote that and then performed in it as well, and kind of co-produced it with Lisa Campbell, who's this amazing producer and casting director in Australia.
Mm.
And it went really well. And then we kind of licensed it, and we did like a big Australian tour, and then some other people licensed it and did it regionally, and other people played it, and it kind of had this whole life. But I felt really proud about it and felt like I had a little bit more autonomy, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of my career. And so when Matilda came around, they asked me to go in for Mrs. Wormwood because I'd
Miss
just
Wormwood.
been
Yeah, I read
playing,
that just
yeah,
recently. Yeah.
yeah, because I'd just been playing Lucille Ball. And
Right.
then I got cut first
Oh
round.
yeah, I could see how they would make that connection. That's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. And so I got cut first round, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. There you go. Shit. And then but I'd worked with the Australian musical director, and he asked me to come back in and was like, would you come back in to cover? Like come in as like a Miss Honey, Mrs. Wormwood cover, because there's very few people that can kind of do that, and you could do both.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't know. And only because I didn't want to sign up for something that was a really long contract, and I knew Matilda would run for a long time.
Yeah.
And because I'd just been like having this success in creating something for myself. And he was like, look, just come in, see what happens. And I was like, okay, as long as I'm not wasting anyone's time, I'll come in. And so I did. And I went in, I did all the rounds of like all the ensemble dance calls. I did private dance calls as Mrs. Wormwood. I did all the Mrs. Wormwood stuff. I did Pathetic once. And then like in the finals, I had to do the Miss Honey Matilda scene in Miss Honey's house into the song My House. That was the first time I had to do it. And I did
Yeah.
that. And I remember because I hadn't ever had it, they hadn't really seen me for Miss Honey very much, and I hadn't had any direction on it. I was totally just doing my version. And because it was that thing where, again, they hadn't necessarily seen me for that role, I think I felt this, and I wasn't like desperate for it. I didn't think I was being seen for the character for the role. I kind
Yeah.
of had a freedom about doing it my way, and
Mm-hmm.
and was just like, well, this is what I can offer you. And anyway, did all the auditions, left, and then yeah, like a week or two later, I got a phone call from my agent saying that Matthew had wanted to Skype me, because Skype was the thing at the time, for the role of Miss Honey. And I was like, what the
Wow.
hell? This is crazy. So I ended up doing this Zoom with Matthew, and then got offered the part. And Tim later told me, he was like in my dressing room one day, and he told me, he's like, do you know how that happened? And I was like, not really. And he said that, they'd gone through all the auditions. There was two people they were looking at for Miss Honey, who I do know. I know both of them. They're phenomenal Australian performers,
Mm.
like fierce women, gorgeous, would have both been brilliant at it. And so they'd suggested those two for Miss Honey. And then I was in the set of videos for like covers. And Matthew watched the two tapes of the two girls and was like, these guys are both great. Something wasn't 100% like, yes, it's that person. And
Yeah.
so he was like, let me watch all the tapes. So he did. And he saw my tape and was like, that's her. That's the person I want to cast. And they were
Wow.
like, what the hell? We've barely seen this person. And so that's why he was like, cool, let me Zoom with her. And so then, yeah, they did. And that's what happened.
Wow.
So it's kind of like this beautiful story, because, and one that I like sharing quite freely, because it's such a reminder. I think for me, it's always been a reminder of three things. One, what is meant for you will not pass you. Like, just trust the process.
Yeah.
Two, like, put yourself out there. Like, keep going. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And like, and if you take yourself out of competition or out of the mix, nothing can happen. So like,
Right.
keep putting yourself out there. And
Yeah.
three, like, honor your version. Like, be yourself. Like, celebrate your secret spice, because that's the thing that's going to make you stand out. If you try and do what
Right.
everyone else is doing, then it's not going to be you, because someone else is going to be themselves. Whoever's being
Right.
themselves is going to
Right.
do that the best. I can't be Lauren
Yeah.
Ward. She's going to be the best Lauren Ward. So I can just
Right.
be Elise McCann. And those
Yeah.
three things have kind of stuck with me.
It's also a
So
healthy reminder that like no matter what you do, it comes down to like one person watching tapes in a room by himself.
seriously, yeah.
And that on a certain level, that's like extremely subjective
Yes,
to
it
that
is.
person's taste. And it doesn't define you or
And
mean that you
and
got
that
it or not based on anything other than that person's preference.
That's exactly it, Eric. I feel that it totally. And I think that's also why, when the thing you have to remember when you're working in this industry is this sense of like competition that gets inbuilt in the industry between people. It's like, it's ridiculous. We need
Yeah.
to get rid of it, because it is no one's choice to get cast. Everyone is doing their best. All you can do, like, if I get cast, if Lucy gets cast, if Tina gets cast, like whoever the hell gets cast, it is not their choice. They're not doing anything to you. They're just doing their best. Someone else is choosing. So like,
Yeah.
we actually have to celebrate each other and just be like, cool, like, everyone's doing their best, because
Yeah.
it doesn't help anyone. It's like, and if I get cast, I want people to celebrate me. I want people to be to cheer for me and support me and be on my side. I don't want people to resent me. So therefore, I
Thousand
can't do
percent.
that
Yeah.
to someone else. Like, if they
Yeah.
get cast, be like, you know what? Then that one was yours. And as you said, like, if it had been up to Nick, the associate, one of these other two girls would have gotten it, but it
Right.
happened to be up to Matthew this time. And I think that's that great, as you said, that great reminder that, like, no, it's no one right or wrong. It's just
Right.
whoever works for that version. And that's going to
Yeah.
change the next time they do Matilda, because someone else is going to be doing that casting, and someone else will, for that one director, this is the version. For another director, it's someone else.
Yeah. Is it a different vibe auditioning and going out for stuff in New York than it is when you're in Sydney or Melbourne, or what's
It
the difference?
it is different. For me, I think it's particularly different. And I think it'd probably be a unique question for every actor. But for me, it's different
Mhm.
because, well, first and foremost, in Australia, now, like, I've had a really significant career, and so I kind of know
Yeah.
everyone.
You're
And I mean,
known.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of young people that I don't know, but I know all the creatives, and my CV gives me a certain level of access that I'm really grateful for. I've worked really hard for, but just means that the process of auditioning means that you get given some, you get invited into things. People treat you with respect. They let you do all the material, even if you're not right. They're
Yeah.
going to give you some time, because you've
Hmm.
kind of worked hard to earn that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
whereas in New York, not as many people know me. Like, there are some creatives, like, I've worked with Alex Timbers, and I've worked with Bart Scher, and I've worked with Des McAnuff, and I've worked with some really amazing directors here. And there are
Hmm.
some amazing casting directors that really like me and that have been cheerleaders for me. But the industry as a whole doesn't really know me. So
Right.
they can look at my CV and go, oh, that's interesting, and ask me questions. But they don't necessarily that they wouldn't necessarily all know me. So I'm not going to get the same amount of time or the same amount of like, I guess ease or familiarity with the
Right,
process.
right, right, right.
But in terms of like, so that's a different thing. But taking the personal out of it, the actual auditioning is also different, I think, because in Australia, we audition in blocks almost. Like,
Mm,
because of the nature of the country and the landscape, no one show can sit in any one city um, in perpetuity. Like
right.
in New York, if something is going amazingly, like Lion King, how long has it been here? I have no idea, but it's still
Yeah, a
running
long time.
because a long time, right?
Yeah,
Because it's, really successful and it can keep running. That can't happen in Australia because the population just doesn't enable it and we don't have enough theatres. So it means
right,
every show will inevitably tour and or occasionally it'll just do like, Sydney and Melbourne, but they'll sit there for a significant period, but it's going to have an end date.
right,
And so because of that, shows audition quite significantly in advance because they know the dates that they have available to
right,
run, because everything has to go, okay, well, I'm going to be here then, so then I'll move into that theater then, because you have to tee up a tour. So it
right.
just means that literally everyone was auditioning in Australia for Beetlejuice, Hadestown, MJ, Book of Mormon. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this. I'm sure all these shows have been announced, but anyway, if they
Yeah,
haven't,
I think
ooh.
so. Yeah,
But
yeah.
but yeah, everyone was auditioning for all of these shows at the same time, and they were all
Right.
starting either. Most of them are starting in 2025, or
Mm,
some of them are starting, and they run through 2026. Like
right,
you're auditioning for things really significantly far out, and that means that if you don't get anything in that block, then you go, okay, cool. I know I've now got to look at say the state theatre companies. So that's things like what might be the Roundabouts or the MCCs or whatever it might be. In
yeah,
Australia, that's Melbourne Theatre Company, Sydney Theatre Company, Hayes Theatre Company, where they do smaller 3-month runs of something, and they do like a year program at a whole, but they audition them later in the process. Or you might want to do some other independent stuff. Like it kind of informs what your year is gonna look like in a different
right,
way.
right.
Whereas in New York, there is so much theatre. There is so much theatre that auditions both for this city as well as for regional or for other
Yeah,
states. There is something can close and then all of a sudden something's going to come up really quickly. And so the process of auditioning is there's so much more volume. And so it means that you approach auditioning, I think, with a different mindset, because you know that if you don't get that audition this week, that can suck, but there's going to
right,
be 3 more that are going to come up in the next week or the next 2 weeks. And
right.
and so there's just a different, I guess, mentality around volume and a different mentality around, oh, I didn't get that one. Shit, that means I don't have anything for the year. Or, okay,
Right, right,
cool.
right, right.
I'm just gonna wait another couple of weeks. So I'm gonna put myself up for that. So there's just
Yeah,
a different mentality. And I think Americans that audition in New York, but you have to be really flexible and you have to get really good at having like a book. You go in with
yeah.
like a whole book of stuff to audition for, and someone can say, what else have you got? And you have to be able to sing it. But the practice of auditioning is so much more refined because people have the ability to audition all the time. Whereas
Right,
in
right.
Australia, like a show comes up and they're like, so you go, oh shit, I want to prepare something that's in line with that show. And so
Hmm.
people tend to audition much more with a sense of like specificity around each
Right,
audition, rather than
right,
this is
right.
an array of things that I can do that show off my skill set in general. One of them
Yeah,
will
yeah,
work.
yeah,
You go,
yeah.
okay, this Beetlejuice, what else can I look at that Eddie Perfect's written? Or what else looks like the style? Or
Right, right.
this is, I don't know, Hairspray, here's something from the 60s. Like, I don't know. So
Yeah.
it's a different mentality and a different skill set, I think,
Interesting,
auditioning.
interesting.
That was a really
Well,
long
we
answer.
no, no, no.
Sorry.
That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to know.
I
We got to
talk,
switch
in case you
gears a
didn't
little bit.
realize.
We got to switch gears a little bit because we got to get into some God, spirituality, religion. That's really
Please.
ultimately the reason why I started this podcast was one, because I started to realize, okay, like where do I want to go in life? What do I want to do?
Mhm.
Everyone has a different story of how they got there. And so I'm just so interested in people's stories of how they got to where they got. But also just in my own faith journey and questioning and doubting and
Mm.
trying to make sense of crazy world. I also realize that people are living that in such a different and unique way, and I kind of get something
Mm,
out of everyone's journey, and I'm trying to put the
mm.
puzzle pieces together. So it's very open-ended. God, no God, spirituality, however you live life. What does that look like to you over your life?
Well, like I said, like I was brought up, I went to Catholic primary school, mostly because in Australia, they have like if it's a religious primary school, it's like it tends to also be free, like public school.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, but you tend to just well, I don't know. There's just a lot of them. A lot of kids I know go to co-ed religious denomination schools, just because there's a lot of them around. So
Yeah.
we went to a Catholic school, and so we had to go to church, and that meant I was baptized, reconciled, Holy Communion. I did all the things.
Yeah.
When I went to high school, I was like a Eucharistic minister, which basically meant I was able to, I don't know if that means the same thing here for you guys, but it meant that I went through the process to be able to be one of the people that like held the cup or held like
Hell the elements. Yeah.
yeah, the elements,
Yeah.
that's the word. But then as time progressed, and my family would go to church when I was a kid, because it was part of like our school, but also because our church at the time put people into family groups. So like
Hmm.
they'd pick like kids from different year groups and their families and put them together. And so basically it made you like a community group. And
Yeah.
the people that were in our family group are actually still some of my mum and dad's best friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we used to spend Christmas together every year. And you were always living in the same area, similar areas as well. So it was
Yeah.
just like I don't know, really built a lot of the community in our family.
Was
Um,
it something you believed then, or was it something you did?
I honestly, I find it hard to reflect on accurately, because I think it's something I did. I
Yeah.
think it is something that I believed in some respects, because now where I sit, I I definitely have a spirituality. I believe in something bigger than myself.
Sure.
Um, I don't affiliate it with a particular denomination or a particular God.
Yeah.
Um, and part of that is I I don't love a lot of the things that organized religion, a lot of the ways that some organized religions, not all, um, engage with community and engage
Mm.
with individuals. I don't agree with it. I don't like
Mm.
the idea of like fear and using
Yeah.
fear to foster things. I don't like the idea of like excluding others to make some people feel more important. I don't like the idea of saying this is right and this is wrong. Like as much as I love to read at maths because there was a right and a wrong, I don't think that things are that black and white.
Mm.
And um, and so I love the ideas of, be kind, be generous, be patient. I love, you know, forgive. I love the idea of repentance, of forgiving and,
Yeah.
and atoning for things that we've done wrong. But I don't agree with the way that we treat others sometimes, that some of the way that organized religions treat people and
Yeah.
separate. And so that's why I don't really affiliate it with a particular God, because I guess I don't agree with some of the things that the Catholic religion has done. And that was the religion I was brought up in. And I haven't really
Yeah.
explored other religions to like take that over.
Sure. Sure.
But I do
Yeah.
believe in something, and I and I maybe that's I think about this a lot actually. I wonder whether some of that is a protection or like a defense mechanism, like an
Hmm.
idea of like saying, um, I believe in something bigger than myself because it means that there's a comfort in that. There's an idea that like it's not all on me. There's an idea that there is something else to like help guide me. I don't know why,
Mm.
but I do believe in something else.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because it's there. I just feel it. I don't know, but um, I do believe in something bigger than myself, and I feel like I've experienced it in my life. Like there are times where I've been able to really clearly be like, I want this for my life. And I will think about why that's something that I think that I want to bring into my life. And I think about, is that based in ego? Is that based in a lesson I want to learn? Is that based in, no, that feels central to the values or core, like a core value that I want to experience more. And
Yeah.
as long as it's not ego based, as long as it's something that's about like growing as a person or wanting to share something more or challenge myself or whatever it might be, then I feel really okay about being trying to like, I guess, be open to calling those things in. And I'm
Mm.
not joking. Those things have then literally come into my life.
Yeah.
And from opportunities, from like a friend of mine has had a similar thing. Some people call it manifesting. For me, I call it like I think it's about clarifying. Like if I can get really clear about what it is I'm looking for in my life and what the direction I want to go, whether that's in relationships. Like I have a girlfriend that really has dated a lot of guys that have not necessarily treated her the way that I know she wants someone to treat her. And
Hmm.
but yet she always chooses to go for a guy that is essentially saying he's not available. And yet, like whether that's he literally says, I'm not available, I don't want to date anyone seriously, or he is, whatever else it might be. She tends to go for has in the past used to go for guys that were really unavailable and that weren't really wanting to treat her with that sense of kindness and devotion. But yet she kept going for that guy. And she was saying that's not, I don't want that, but she'd always go for that. And I was like, well, you're
Right.
actually like you're behaving in a way that is in opposition to what you're saying that you want.
Right.
And so I feel like when we get clear about what we want, like there was a period of time in my life where prior to Matilda, I remember like sitting down and saying, I really wanted to find a space. I'd been traveling a lot. I was like, I wanted a space where I felt really calm. I could almost visualize like this sense of like, um, like white curtains and like greenery and like sunlight, lots of sunlight. And I was like, I just wanted a sanctuary where I could be at peace. Like I felt like I wanted peace and that felt and calm. And that felt like finding a space that felt like that.
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to challenge myself because I hadn't done a lot of TV and film at the time. And I was like, I really want to do some TV and film. I don't want to be the lead. I just want to be like a small role to understand what that industry is like, to like learn about it a bit more, to expand myself and just challenge myself in that area. And I was like, and I wanted, so there was different things that I wanted. And I sat down and I like meditated and I was like, is this based on ego? What is this about? And then I was like, no, that feels like really accurate. And then I like did a version of my sense of praying, essentially, where I just like meditated and was like, this is what I'm grateful for. This is what I feel like I'm ready for now. And I'm not joking, within 3 months. And I actually also, one of the other things was I was like, I would like to play the lead role in Matilda. And at the time, I was thinking Mrs. Wormwood. And it didn't quite feel right, but I was like, something about that show. I'd seen it on Broadway, and I was like, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm meant to do that show. I feel like it's meant to teach me something about
Interesting.
fighting for what is good, I feel like I'm ready for that opportunity. And I was like, and I don't think it's about ego. I really feel like I'm meant to do this for some reason. And then literally within 3 months, I got cast in this TV show about Peter Allen. I played his sister. I'd got cast in Matilda as Miss Honey, and I'd had to been required to move house. And I literally walked into this apartment that looked like the thing I'd visualized. Within 3 months, all of those things happened. And that's
Yeah.
not to say that like it's, fanciful and something just dropped it in my lap, but I think it's
Yeah.
about getting clear about what you want. So you actually start to take steps in the direction that reflect what you're wanting for your life.
Yeah.
And I think it's about like, then you also recognize the things that you're grateful for and you recognize the things that aren't serving you. And so all of that to me ties in with like believing that there is something else out there that if you can get really clear about what you want and you value the things that are feeling good in your life and you show gratitude and then you actually can also welcome in the things that you want for the next chapter of your life.
Yeah.
I know
Isn't
that
it funny
sounds
that
roundabout and weird,
that we
but
use the language like there's something else out there, but
yeah.
what you just described is something else inward.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what I mean?
true.
Like we think of it as like because we've always been taught like God is in the clouds, like something
Yeah.
out there, but it feels more like you've tapped into something inside of you
Oh, that's
that's
so true.
deeper than what
Yeah.
your brain is going for. It's such a common
Mm.
story to hear um growing up in the church. Yeah, I like the forgiveness, the love, the Jesus
Yeah.
parts.
Yeah.
But then the organized religion of it became a power structure that I don't like
Yeah.
anymore. And
Yeah.
it's not immune to becoming that in the same way that Broadway has had its power structures, the entertainment
Mm,
industry has had its power
absolutely.
structures that recently have been starting to get torn down.
Yeah.
Um, and when it became, I mean, Australia, the Hillsong Church, insane power
Yep.
structure that hid
Yep.
stuff for a long time.
Oh yeah. Oh
Lit-
yeah.
I think all through high school, that's the only thing I knew of. Australia was still
Oh,
sanctioned
really?
because it was massive.
Wow.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
massive in the United States. But yeah, when those ideas and stuff get organized and become a power structure, it's gonna go wrong
Yeah.
immediately. And that's so many people's experience. And I think it's the reason why I have such a hard time like even calling myself a Christian, like saying the word Christian, because I just don't
Wow.
want to be
And yet you
associated
work in the
with any of
church.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't
That's
want
true,
to be
isn't it?
associated with any of it at all. And even like our little church, we don't like really associate ourselves even with like the local denomination that we're part of. Like we just like
Wow.
let's just be separate and do good in the community, do good over the world however we can in our own little way, because I totally see how yeah, how it just becomes this thing that people get turned off by so quickly.
It's so interesting that you say that because I think you're right. And I think that that does police the way that people engage in religion, that sense of like not wanting to be confused as agreeing with or supporting something that has also been seen to not be generous or kind or whatever it is. Like because I have
Yeah.
a lot of friends that potentially have been brought up in some religious denomination and yet don't really associate with the organized religion element of it anymore, and actively don't would say, oh, I'm not Catholic, or I'm not Christian, or I'm
Yeah.
not, because it is about almost having to separate yourself.
Yeah.
And yet there's also like a weird fear or shame around having to do that, because you don't want to also suggest that you don't believe in anything. Like it's so confused. I think it's so confused because I think you're
Yeah.
right. Like it is so intrinsically a part of um that sense of faith, or that sense of like believing in something bigger than yourself,
Yeah.
whether that is going inwards or outwards. And I love that
Yeah.
you just said that about it's about going inwards. But there is something that you don't want to shun that. I don't want to shun that. I don't want to be like, no, that's nothing. I don't want to dismiss it, because when you're in alignment and when you're feeling that flow and you're feeling that sense of like connection, and like my friend, he calls it pestoing, because he one day was like at Trader Joe's looking for pesto, and couldn't actually. I'm going to introduce you to him. I think you guys would get on like a house on fire. He um he was like looking for the pesto, and he was looking on the shelf, and was like couldn't see it anywhere. And he was like, "This is crazy." And he's like, "I know the pesto is normally here." He's like, "Where is the pesto?" He's like, "Come on, show me the pesto." And next thing you know, this lady just puts a jar of pesto directly on the shelf in front of him that had nothing else on it, and he was like, thank you. Like there's something about like, you know what I mean? Like being in line with what it is that you're looking for,
Yeah,
like feeling like
cosmically in
you're
tune to
really
something.
cosmically in tune. You're like really living your authenticity or something. As much as I hate using that word because I know it's all, corrupted and everyone thinks it's wanky, but like that thing of like being really honest, really truthful, really grounded, and things coming into line. And I feel like, so he calls it pestoing, right? Because he's like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
pestoing right now. Like things are just like falling in line. It makes you
Wow.
feel like you're on the right path. Um,
Yeah.
and I think people don't want to shun that. They don't want to be like, oh, that's nothing, but they also don't want to necessarily associate it with religion. And so
Yeah.
it's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's
I've been
hard.
talking.
I mean, at best, we're all agnostic. We all don't know.
That's
You know
exactly
what I
right.
mean?
That's
But
exactly right.
how we define our not knowing puts us in one
Yeah.
camp or another, and you got to be careful of
It's
how you define your not knowing
and
sometimes.
I think it's interesting as well, like what else is happening in our lives and what we do for a job. Like
Mhm.
in the sense that so like a lot of friends in the theater community, um, the theater is like their religion. Like
Yeah.
I know people say that all the time, but in the sense that it provides you the sense of community, it provides you with a sense of purpose, all of those things, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like I know that we were at a dinner. We went to this like really cool dinner at like this fancy club in Baltimore. And we were sat next to this guy who was an astrophysicist, and he was like
Yeah.
studying like black holes. Have you heard this?
And Andy
Did
talked
Andy
about it
tell you
when he
about
was
this?
on. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There was like he was like, yeah, studying black holes and things that like we don't know to be true. And yet
Yeah.
he's a very strong practicing Christian. And I've been thinking about that, and about how, because his world lives in the unknown, you can then live in the unknown
Yeah.
of Christianity, because they actually,
Yeah.
even though he's a man of science, they can coincide.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, someone that maybe is living in the real practicality, like the black and white, this cell separates into this cell which does this, like they may
Yeah.
not be able to live in the unknown because that is not their
Totally.
world. Like, interestingly, my mum was like a nurse. She was a nurse and a midwife, and then she was a doula for many years, and then she did her master's and became like a director of women's and children's health. And she was also like a caterer. She did a whole bunch of different things, but nursing and health has been like her biggest career and profession. And
Hmm.
she the thing that she was Church of England, because she grew up in London, in the UK, sorry, and then in Bath. And then she converted to Catholicism, because my dad's family were Catholic when she married
Mm.
my dad.
Yeah.
And even though like my dad is not religious at all now, my mum, we don't go to church or anything like that. But my mum recently said that she almost would like to go back to church or find something like that, because she misses the community of it, because she doesn't she loves that sense of service. It's why she's always been in health and things like that. But she doesn't get the same sense of community that she had when she had like a church or something. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's interesting. I find it
Totally.
interesting about like what people have in their lives, the other things they have. And I think that when we have less control, when we have less autonomy, when we have less power, um, when we have less income, we sometimes do look for religion or other things to help give us a sense of reason or purpose or a sense of safety in the world. When you have, pardon my language, fuckloads of money or people doing things for you left, right, and center, you might be like, oh, I don't need that,
Don't need that.
because
Yeah.
you feel like you're bigger than, you feel like you don't need for something else to help you, like I just think it's interesting the other things we have in our lives and how that then reflects in how people look at religion and community and all of those things.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
We gotta wrap this up because I know you have more important things to do throughout the day.
I have an eye doctor's
Um,
appointment. I'm getting my eyes tested. Yeah. I'm very blind.
um, can we end on what are you hopeful about, excited about, like one thing that when you wake up you're like, yes.
Oof. Honestly, I feel so grateful in my life right now. Like I feel like I'm in a pestoing stage where
Yeah.
all of the things that I just feel like things are just happening in my life. They've come out of the blue, unexpected, and I feel really lucky. I genuinely, every day I wake up, I feel lucky. Like
Mm.
I'm very lucky in this relationship. I'm very lucky. I feel very close with my family. I feel very I've got some work coming up that I'm really excited by, that kind of just came my way. Um, like I I'm actively trying to sit in it and like not question it, because
Yeah.
it's so easy to be like, oh, when's it going to fall apart, or
Yeah.
when's it going to get taken away from me? But I actually was talking to a friend yesterday, because I remember a period of time, like around when my mum was really sick. My mum was really sick. She was going through a court case. My COVID had happened. I'd lost all my work. My partner at the time and I were trying to decide if we were going to have a family or not. And we were going through a lot of troubles. And it felt like there was so many big, big, big things going on that were really fucking hard. And it just
Yeah.
felt like thing after thing after thing. And I remember just having to be like, cool, just take it a day at a time. You just got to take everything a day at a time. Nothing stays the same. This too will pass. Like, everything is constantly shifting and changing in some capacity.
Yeah.
I can't control it. All I can do is like breathe and move through it and do the best I can. And I now look at this moment where I feel like I'm so lucky and I feel so grateful. And like, I'm actually in a moment where all the things I could ever want, I've been given.
Yeah.
And I have to go, okay, you know what? That's okay. You're allowed to have this moment, because there are moments, and there will be again. There will
Yeah.
be moments again where not everything is great. And
Right.
and that's okay. So like, just try and be grateful for it and like sit in it and enjoy it for the moment that you can, in the ways that you can, because yeah, it won't always be that way because nothing is the same. Everything changes,
Yeah.
So it's not one particular thing that I feel hopeful for. I genuinely am like, I'm really lucky right now. I'm living a really beautiful life where I have so many wonderful, it's mostly about people and like I have great friends, I have great family, I have a great partner, I have, I have purpose in my job. I have a
Yeah.
business that I run with one of my best friends that I'm so grateful for that feels really purposeful. I get to do lots of fun things, I get to produce, I get to perform. Like I'm really fucking lucky and I don't take
Awesome.
it for granted.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Thank you for saving me at that party. And
Thank you,
I'm so glad
Eric.
we got to do this. Thank you so much.
Me too. It's been a joy.